culminating in a caged fight between Merle and Martinez. The governor locks his daughter Penny, a walker, inside his room. Michonne rebels, forcing the governor to exile her from Woodbury. That's not true. He didn't exile her. She chose to leave.
She chose to leave.
Lucy. Andrea decides to stay. At the prison, the survivors mourn their losses. Daryl and Maggie find powdered formula to feed Lori's baby, also known as Judith. Well, I guess not yet. Rick grows unhinged and goes on a walker-killing rampage. He hears a telephone ring and answers, saying the one word he said this whole episode, hello.
Oh, yeah.
So what did you think?
Overall, there's a lot that I liked about it, but I think overall I was left frustrated because the way that episode 4 left off with, of course, the death of Lori, my expectations we were going to spend a lot of time with that. And they sort of continued that parallel back and forth from the prison to Woodbury, and it left me wanting more, because there's lots of really great little bits to this episode that I really liked, but was left with it. And we'll get into it in a bit, but was just left wanting a little bit more from the episode.
You want to be more with Rick after that happened, kind of, and those guys.
Right. Yeah. So it sort of felt like they were rushing through a lot of stuff that they really could have hit upon. That they just we didn't get enough of it.
I mean, I felt like this episode was more of a Woodbury episode, but just touching base back at the prison a little bit as the B story. It felt like the A story was really in Woodbury. So I was in fact, the very first scene was Rick just sitting there panting and not even able to hear everyone. He's so aggrieved right after what we saw. I don't know if that was the very first.
No, the first episode, because I remember when I first watched this episode, I thought it was, we're going back in time, but it was at Woodbury.
Oh yeah,
it was at Woodbury, and
festivities. Yeah. So when they did go back to that moment, though, I forgot that they actually had cut back to right after Rick came out and did the scene that became 1,000 memes. But anyway, I guess I was looking at it more as a Woodbury episode and evaluating it that way. And with that in mind, I thought it was great. I really I really like this dynamic of Andrea and Michonne at odds over whether the governor's good guy, and deciding myself what I would think if I was in their place, really trying to forget what I know about him, forget the things that he's hidden from everyone, and just take him from what we've actually seen, and then try to evaluate it that way. So I think it's interesting to do that. It's hard to do as a TV watcher, but I feel like with good writing, it makes what characters do make more sense.
Well, I know that's absolutely. I think what made this episode good is the fact that there were so many good acting moments in this. I think David Morrissey, we'll get to the points, but I think David Morrissey is such throughout his performances, I really enjoyed, but I think he's such a scene stealer early on. I'm sad that I know where we're going, because he's doing such a phenomenal job right now of sort of, we know he's off. I mean, obviously we know he's off because of his fish tank, TV screens, but he's still playing this 1960s sitcom character dad to a T really well. And you start to feel that tension a little bit in this episode, which I really like, where you're sort of waiting for him to go off on somebody. But he hasn't done that yet. So I very much, because the scenes with Michonne in this are pretty great.
Like even with what we know of the governor, that he killed all those soldiers, I think that's by far the worst thing we've seen him do, and it's bad enough that makes him a bad person, right? There's no question about that. We know that, we've seen it, but just as far as a character study, we saw him do that. We saw, we've seen Penny as a zombie, his daughter. We've seen the heads in the tanks. for me anyway, up to this point, and especially if I hadn't read the comic, which I had, but I have to try to forget that too. I would be just going, yeah, this is a bad guy, but I'm still curious, like what makes him tick? How much is he actually invested in this town? And, just trying to understand his psychology because, as I've said to Lucy, he's so enigmatic. He keeps everything close to the vest and he wears this mask that sometimes he seems passionate, but you wonder, he seems like the kind of guy that could totally fool everyone. So you're not sure what you can trust about him.
I think the question that, as I've listened to your podcast over the years, I think the constant question of Rick, and what you would do in a situation like this, yes, he killed those soldiers, but you can, and that's bad. I mean, but I constantly am playing, okay, I'm sitting in my house, I'm a teacher, I live this normal life. What would I do if I were in a leadership position and I knew that there were soldiers near this town that I've helped create? Like, I mean, I'm not saying that it's a good thing, but there are things that we would do, Rick, that we,
Yeah.
that, and I think at this stage, because I didn't start, I listened to the podcast, but I hadn't started watching the show yet when I binged through these episodes. And I remember I hadn't read the comic yet either. So I knew he was the bad guy, but I was super curious at how it was going to turn out. I had no idea how it was going to go. And
Mm-hmm.
I still am left with this fantastic impression of David Morrissey and how he plays his character. So, and
Yeah.
I think he was just so good in this.
He's a standout villain. Yeah, for people who didn't remember when Jim was on before, he started listening to the podcast because he was looking for a podcast on the movie Misery, which we covered in, I think, our second or third episode.
The Mist. The Mist.
Oh, The Mist. Sorry. Yeah, The Mist.
Yeah, The Mist.
Third episode, The Mist. Frank Darabont directed, and then you listened to some of the podcasts even though you weren't watching the show.
I listened through. I listened through midway through season 4 without ever having watched an episode.
That's incredible. No one else has your story.
And then I wouldn't watch it weekly until I binged up to it, and I can't remember somewhere. The first episode I watched was, we're allowed to spoil a little bit, right?
Yeah, anything. Yeah.
The first episode I watched in real time was the Herschel episode, the last Herschel episode, and then I was week to week. But up until that point, I had just listened to your podcast and then spent like a month kind of binging through the first 3. So this is only the second time I've seen season 1, season 2, season 3, which is I've forgotten. Last week, as I watched it, because I was supposed to be on last week, and when I watched that episode, the only thing I remembered was the end. I'd forgotten that T-Dog died. I'd forgotten that Andrew came. When Andrew came back, I was like, holy shit. So it's been a lot of fun rewatching the series just because this part of it isn't so ingrained as we get into kind of midway through season 4.
Yeah. And I feel like getting into 4, 5, especially 6, and then 7 and 8, there's going to be so much that I've forgotten completely. I can't wait. But let's get in. Let's stay on track here. And what's your first point for this episode?
So my first point, I think the thing that I loved about this episode is, it was an episode written by, gosh, why am I forgetting? I'm totally going stone blank. Angela Kang wrote it. Yeah. Angela Kang wrote it, and Greg Nicotero directed it.
Oh wow!
And it was this great run that they were on, where they did like 5 or 6 episodes together, and then they kind of stopped doing that. But what I loved about this is it really deals a lot with emotional toll. Obviously, Rick is the primary one that's in my mind, but the governor, his emotional toll, we get to see glimpses of it, especially when he's combing his daughter's hair. And then I'm always curious about kind of cultish behavior. So the whole idea of the Woodbury arena with fighting at the end of it. And there's this kind of marked scene where we're watching Andrea and the governor, and then this kid guy puts his kids on his shoulder as they're watching Merle and Martinez get into that fight, and I'm just sitting there and just watching this script kind of go through those emotional turns was really fantastic. I Sometimes I get a little down on Andrew Lincoln just because sometimes he can overdo it, and I
Yeah.
think I think him overdoing it in this episode is kind of what was called for, and watching him deal with that, of course, ending with the famous phone call, and then
It was intense. I
yeah,
felt on
oh
edge watching him.
yeah, yeah, every second of that.
Mm.
The scene where Glenn comes walking in, and you just see the axe, and it pans up
Right.
to Rick's face, and just the
Bloody.
oh gosh, and then kind of the dichotomy of that is we get to see the governor on the other side of things, with his zombie daughter, and he's brushing her hair and trying to play the music, and ends up putting a bag over her head, and then we end with the town and on the one side of things, and then we end with um Rick on the other side of things, and it just kind of it the emotional toll that this episode shows us
Hmm.
post the death of
Lori.
two main characters, really. And I just my side note, my one point from last week's episode I had been on is how pissed I am that T-Dog had to die in that same episode as Lori.
Yeah.
Pisses me off. Like it's almost like he got screwed over right up to the end.
Yeah. It is. I mean, I think in one sense it can be good. Good's maybe the wrong word, but to have two big characters die in one episode just to keep it unpredictable, kind of like Glenn and Abraham. But then you do feel like Abraham and T-Dog got short shrifted.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
in the
for
same
sure,
in the
for
same
sure.
way.
For sure, for sure. And then the other piece to that too, and I think an understated kind of emotional piece to this was Glenn digging the grave.
Yeah.
Glenn,
Wishing they'd killed the prisoners on
yes,
site.
yes. And the emotional moment between Glenn and Herschel. It's Herschel's one moment in this episode where they're standing opposite sides of a gate, and Glenn says that he would do anything to save the people that he loves, and then Herschel puts his hand on the gate on his hand, on Glenn's hand, and that moment just was so touching to me, especially
Hmm.
considering where the relationship started to where it is right now.
Hmm.
So
They're
so it's
buddies now.
it's you can tell that Angela Kang has the pulse of the people in this show.
I know, huh?
Um,
Yeah, because one of the things I loved about when she took over as showrunner is you felt the characters come through more and more of the emotion of the characters. And
yeah,
this episode has that flavor too. Now that you're
yes,
talking
for sure,
about it.
for sure. Yep.
But yeah, just Glenn saying he wished that all the prisoners they'd killed them, and then Herschel says, "Well, Axel and Oscar seem like good guys," and I can understand where Glenn's coming from, but I so admire that Herschel came in with that, given what's
Yeah,
happened.
yeah, yeah, yeah. He's fantastic. Scott
Yeah,
Wilson in this show was just so amazing.
he was. Uh, he had that energy at the conventions too. Just he
Yeah.
came up to me after a panel and just like, "Good job, guy." They're like, "Oh, thanks, Grandpa." All right. So you were talking about the arena fight at the end and the cultishness, and my next point is sort of going to lead up to that. It's called "So Far I Still Don't Blame Andrea," because from Andrea's perspective, I think Woodbury seems great, and I don't blame her for not going back out into the freaking zombie apocalypse with Michonne. But I keep watching for red flags from her point of view. Start off with Milton at this barbecue with coolers, and it's like right out of 50s Americana, cold drinks, sunshade umbrellas. They even had unopened champagne, which I guess they must have scavenged from somewhere or repackaged it or something. A big party, like who wouldn't love that? and then you see Michonne standing there scowling. And I mean, honestly, if I can get rid of everything I know about what the governor's really up to, I was annoyed with Michonne this episode. It turns out she's right. It must be said, but I think a lot of people were kind of annoyed with the character because we didn't know anything about her yet, except that she's just seems pissed off all the time. And in hindsight, it's warranted, but in the moment, it's sort of like, God, you don't even know for sure if you're right, and you're just like bumping into people at the party and not apologizing. And I had an interview with Denai Guerrera after the mid-season finale, season 3, episode 8. Same weekend I was in Georgia filming the finale, season 3 finale.
Yeah.
But I remember she was really curious to know how fans were reacting to Michonne, and I told her that we talked a little bit about this issue, that some people just saw her as a one-note character, basically. And I'm like, but I'm sure once she starts talking more and getting more story that there's going to be more opening up with her. And she agreed. And it was a great interview. And I think if you are curious, you should go listen. I didn't get the episode number, but I'll put the link in the show notes. But then after the call, she really wanted to grill me about what are they saying exactly and stuff like that. It was interesting. I wanted to publish that part, but they said I couldn't. But anyway, so then we have the governor giving a speech to the Woodburyans that this is a celebration of what they've achieved and also a remembrance of those lost. And I'm like, yeah, that seems like such a good thing for a leader to do, to keep inspiring people, but to show respect for what they've had to go through. If I was Andrea, I would think that was great. Then Michonne goes and grabs her sword, kills these research Zeds, and the governor, instead of killing her right there, he goes and tells Andrea, hey, this is what Michonne did. She's making people feel uncomfortable. They want her to leave. And he doesn't want to force her out, but his back is against the wall. I think that's a pretty reasonable reaction to someone who did what Michonne did. Even if say the governor was on the up and up and Michonne was wrong, then this would be the same thing. He would have the same reaction. Go to her friend, try to have her go talk to her. So, and also I forgot to mention, she put her sword right up against his throat and threatened to kill him. Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean, and I remember, thinking, oh, this is when we're going to see him flip. And
yeah,
he didn't.
Nope, he's pretty reasonable. And
she backs out. And Merle comes walking in, and Merle's like,
yeah, is that a problem? No, it's not a problem.
Yeah.
Who knows if he was being totally on the up and up there. But so I'm asking myself, why didn't Michonne just leave already? But I'm sure it's because she doesn't want to leave Andrea alone. She wants to get Andrea out too. So then Michonne later is talking with Andrea. Andrea goes to talk to her about this because the governor asked her to. Michonne says, no one can leave here. And I'm like, well, maybe that's true, but how do you know that? You haven't seen anyone try to leave. And she says, you need to trust me. And then Andrea says, you need to give me more to go on. And I'm like, that is a good, why doesn't Andrea say there were bullet holes in the vehicles of the soldiers that the governor went to get? Isn't it suspicious that he said they got killed by zombies, all of them? Or that one soldier they did bring back that was hurt, supposedly died, but they didn't have a funeral for her. All these things that she's been cataloging, she doesn't say to Andrea. And I think that's for storytelling purposes because we want it to be believable that Andrea still believes in the governor. But in story, it's like, yeah, you should be telling her all this stuff, Yeah. She doesn't know. So Andrea says, I want to give this place a real shot. And Michonne says, I tried. And Andrea says, breaking into houses, that's not trying, that's sabotaging. And I'm like, yeah, that's totally true. But Michonne says that this place is not what they say it is. So then you see them at the gate and it looks like Andrea and Michonne, they have decided to leave, and Merle stops them and he says, it's almost curfew. I'd have to arrange an escort. And now Andrea's getting suspicious and Michonne's like, see, I love this scene. Cause I'm like, yeah, this is a red flag. And then Merle like, okay, you can go.
And then Merle opens the door. Yeah.
and Michelle's like, this is a setup. They knew we were coming. And Andrea's like, whatever, lady. But then Andrea, I think the whole point of that, she didn't have any intention of leaving. She just went there as a test to see if they would let them out, and Michonne's like, well, we should go, and Andrea's like, I don't want to fend for my life outside, then Michonne says, are you coming or not? And Andrea says, don't do this, don't give me an ultimatum, not after everything. And I thought about Dale at the CDC. Andrea doesn't like
Yeah.
ultimatums.
Yep. Yeah.
And yeah, so then yeah, I wouldn't go out with Michonne either at this point. And Michonne says, you just slow me down anyway. And I'm like, damn.
Well, and the hardest part for me about situations like this is, and like, she brings up the best point when she says, this is what we were looking for, which is
Yeah.
110% true. Like, if Michonne is who she is, and she showcases who she is, in this episode, with when she gets her sword, hang out for a bit. Maybe
Yeah.
she is wrong. And I mean, I get what they're doing, and they've got to drive forward. And of course they end up
Yeah.
at the prison for 2 seasons, but they got to drive forward, so they get her out of there. But I was totally left frustrated by that as well. It always frustrates me when you're there this long and you are looking
Yeah.
for that. And
Yeah. Michonne, yeah, I feel like we'd be more sympathetic to her if she was more like, I'm not sure I trust this guy. Versus I don't trust this guy. Let me find reasons why I'm right. You know what I mean? Versus let me investigate. There's a subtle difference there, but she's already convinced that he's bad and she just wants to find reasons for it versus but either way, she's right. So it's kind of hard to argue too hard against her. You know what I mean? She's totally right. And that should totally be said. So then the governor is flirting with Andrea, offers her a drink and some company to console her because her friend left, and they're arm in arm. And that's another reason it makes sense to me at this point for Andrea to stay. She looks up to him. She likes him. She likes what he's doing here. The biggest red flag against him is that Michonne had such bad feelings. And I think Andrea still is going to keep her eyes open for things, but it's not enough to convince her to let go without any, even like I said, Michonne didn't give her anything to go on. So then there's this fighting arena, which if I remember right was bigger in the comic. I think it was like a whole football field, but zombies chained up. Merle and Martinez come in to fight, and it kind of reminded me of the Daryl show too, with Quinn and Daryl at the end there.
Yep. Yeah.
But now Andrea doesn't approve. What the hell is this? The governor's like, what? It's a way to blow off steam. You go for a jog to blow off steam. This is sick. Well, look around. Everyone's having a great time. And that's a good point. Like, I mean, that's kind of a broad thing to say, but you see all these, it's not something that is hidden in secret. It's all these people who've been enjoying everything else about Woodbury, enjoying this. And Andrea says it's barbaric. I agree it's barbaric, but also, just to be devil's advocate, I'm sure this whole thing was inspired by like ancient Roman gladiators fighting in arenas with fighting lions or fighting each other. Those guys, I read up on it a little bit. Some of the fighters were volunteers, but most were enslaved people or criminals. But there's a historical precedent for it anyway, of this brutality in the name of entertainment. I don't think it's great, but when you think about it, is it any more barbaric than MMA fighting? I don't know. Not really.
One of my favorite Stephen King books, novellas is The Running Man. And I, when MMA came out, I was like, oh God, we're heading there.
Yeah.
But that's what I remember when I watched this the first time. That's immediately what I thought of. But the caveat, though, is that we watch Merle start to take the teeth out.
Yeah.
So
I'd say this is much closer to MMA fighting than it is to Running Man because of that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not lethal.
Yeah, for sure. And it's very clear the way, and I really paid attention to that. I watched it when I was watching it the second time. It's very clear that they're fighting, but they're friendly. As silly as that sounds, but they're kind of joking around like two pals. Yeah. And I think, and as you were talking, what's striking too, which probably, and I was conflicted about this until listening to you talk, is that Merle being an accepted like number 2 in this community would be a red flag.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's a good point.
But the way he's portraying it, and I can't remember what episode you were talking about this in the podcast, but Merle's taken a turn. And we'll ride through the roller coaster of that over the next few episodes as we start to merge these two groups together. But I can see it going both ways. I can
Mhm.
see someone who's desperately looking for normal, seeing Merle sort of transform into this number two, and he's done nothing up to this point to look like the Merle of old. Little things.
Yeah. I mean, he called Martinez Brownie.
Yeah, yeah. Well, okay, some big things.
Dick. But no, I mean, I think he's found purpose and a
Yes.
place to belong and feel some pride, and the governor knows how to work Merle. He's putting him in these situations that, like, Merle clearly enjoys going out and corralling zombies and getting to fuck with Milton and just putting him in situations where he can be his asshole self, but be useful and feel useful. So last thing is, I would just like, this is the big red flag for Andrea, and I think yes, it is a red flag as much as I've tried to sort of explain it, but I think it also could be explained, and everyone's enjoying it. The governor has a point, and then it's not like he's hiding something here. But I feel like probably I can't remember because it's been so long since I seen these, but this is probably the point where Andrea starts ignoring red flags that she shouldn't. Maybe.
Yes.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. Because we're about to head down some paths where she very pointedly is just, let me give it some more time.
Yeah. And a lot of times that's what happens. Like in cults, like you
Yeah.
said,
Sure.
they
Sure.
start off with little things that seem weird, but it's like, you're going to be open minded, right? And try out our way of thinking. And then you get used to that. And then they get a little more off until you're going off trying to kill a celebrity or something,
Yeah.
That
But
was a Charles
I
Manson
love
reference.
I love I love the layers though of all of this. Back before we knew where it was going or if we'd read the comics, but I love the layers of, you can say what you want about Michonne, and she was kind of at this point an annoying character, but there's so many different layers to Woodbury right now that
And I want to
all
acknowledge that not everyone would agree with that. I'm sure some
yeah,
listeners are like,
yeah.
she's not annoying. Screw
No,
you.
no.
So
Well, I
that's
mean,
totally
and she's a
valid if you don't think she
badass.
is. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, I mean, her being her coming onto the show is kind of a big deal,
Yeah.
and she does showcase her being that badass in this episode, which is always awesome. But yeah, she just is so pissy.
Yeah. So go on. I'm sorry. I interrupted you.
Oh, no, no. I'm always fascinated in movies like this dystopian society stuff where you're always going to deal with cultish behavior, and especially when you can parallel it, with real life. And not to this is not a political rant by any stretch, but it's interesting to see it maybe becomes more understandable as you see it maybe portrayed in real life as we are, but some people believe we are right now. It makes it a little easier to understand where these people are coming from when they see something like that arena, or maybe some other things that they have seen that maybe they go, I don't think that. Oh, apples. I. It's just
You mean just how behavior that we used to think was crazy gets normalized kind of thing?
Yeah, we put these things in dystopian societies, or we put these things in science fiction, or we put these things because they're hard to they're hard to contemplate, like this is how real life is, and then you turn on the news and you
Yeah.
realize, oh, okay, that guy's
Right.
got a mannequin of that guy sitting in the car seat next to him. That's strange.
Yeah. Yeah. Like when I used to, this is sort of related to what you're saying, but when I was in a writing program that was my grad school, and so we'd write a bunch of short stories and stuff, and a lot of people sometimes would write things and you'd be like, that's not believable, and they'd be like, well, that really happened.
Yeah.
And so sometimes the thing that really happened, you just don't buy it in fiction. But the crazy things can happen in real
Yeah,
life.
yeah, yeah.
All right, what's your next point?
All right, so we might as well talk about Daryl in this episode
All
because
right,
um
Daddy Daryl.
Daddy Daryl. Yeah, I'm not an anti-Daryl guy, I never have been, but this episode was very strange to me. He immediately goes into Daddy Daryl mode. Rick goes off, with his axe. and Daryl goes off to find formula. And again,
They had
I just
opposite reactions to trauma.
yeah,
Rick was enraged.
yeah, and
Daryl
Daryl
became like, Beth, can you make sure Carl's emotionally okay?
yeah, and keep an eye on him. Dad's
Yeah.
not doing great, and so we see that initial reaction. We he and Maggie, and I do like seeing characters that haven't necessarily been together up to this point together for long periods of time.
Hmm.
They go to the daycare, and again, a non-suspenseful moment full of suspense is they crawl into this daycare and everybody's expecting, little baby zombies,
Yeah.
and we don't
And it's
at
like
that. But
a
there are a couple
possum or
like
something.
amazing little moments that as Daryl's like looking over this wall, or maybe it was Maggie, I can't remember off the top of my head, but they're looking at the wall of names and they stop on Sophie, not Sophia, but they stop
Yeah.
on the Sophie name, and then as
That
they
reminded
creep,
him.
yeah, they're just these, and then again, the undercurrent of this episode too, that is Carol's. They think Carol's dead.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Right.
we're kind of watching Daryl go through all of this with Carol being potentially dead, and then they find the formula. He shoots. Then he goes back to Daryl mode. He shoots the possum and says
Hmm.
dinner. And
And like you said, like we don't used to see these two together, but what if Maggie was like, I'll have sex with you, Daryl? You're like, oh, that's her MO.
What?
I'm glad that didn't happen.
Oh,
That would have changed
yeah,
everything.
that would have changed. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Maybe we would have been rooting for Glenn to die in that episode, and it would have changed the whole. But I having now like moved far ahead into the series, and obviously Daryl has his own spinoff. What I liked about it is that we did get to see him as an actor kind of play a completely different role than he had been playing up to this point. There's a little bit of speaking for him in this episode, and he does play a main part in that side of things. But it was just such an interesting contrast to what we've been getting from Daryl. And while he's been transforming into more of a member of this team and this family, I didn't remember this, but I wasn't expecting Daddy Daryl. I knew Daddy Daryl. I knew it was coming, but I didn't realize it was to this. It was such a
Yeah.
contrast watching Rick go off with the axe and
Hmm.
him go right into what's this kid gonna? He literally, I think his first words are, "What's this kid gonna eat?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, that's not the person I was expecting to say that with all of these moms." And I guess there weren't any moms. Never mind, there weren't any moms there, but
Yeah. They're gone. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah. I mean, I enjoyed it. I liked, yeah, he says, because the baby's crying, and Herschel says, "Let me see the baby," and Daryl says, "We got to feed it. You got anything the baby can eat?"
yeah.
But I particularly liked this because I like that Judith's first full episode really is one where Daryl is supremely concerned about her, and
Yes.
I love how that carries to the end of the series where in the final season he's her primary caretaker at the Commonwealth. It's just, I don't know, there's something about that. I'm sure they were probably thinking about this episode when they wrote that for him later on, but
Yeah.
he's so nurturing and he's just determined to get formula. He's like, we ain't losing nobody else. I'm going on a run right now. Let's go. We're losing light. And take with a little second to take care of Carl. I kind of also like that, like he's been Rick's second in command kind of lately more and more.
Yep.
And now that Rick's out of commission, Daryl just rises right into the leader position. He's telling people orders for how to handle the zombies or something. And I thought that was pretty cool.
And they're
interesting.
all fine with it. They're all
Yeah,
absolutely fine
nobody's.
with it.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
a natural.
So including Herschel. And see, I put such a weight on Herschel as like the granddad of it all, and he doesn't blink an eye. Whereas with Shane, it was a slightly different story.
If somebody came in and tried to direct things, you mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
He wouldn't like
Yeah.
that. He wants to be
Yeah.
dominant.
Yeah.
So they get the formula, and I asked ChatGPT just out of curiosity, what if they couldn't find the formula? What would they do? And I knew ChatGPT would be a little cagey on this because ChatGPT tries to be really careful not to give bad advice that could cause harm, you know? And I'm like, I swear I'm just doing a podcast on The Walking Dead and I want to know what Daryl could have done. I'm not trying to ask you how to feed my own baby something besides formula, you know? And so it finally gave me, because it said, you know, the best thing to do first is to get another woman who's lactating to give her milk, a donor, as a donor. But it's like, that's not an option here. And then it said do formula. But then it said, in a pinch, animal milk, goat or cow milk, diluted and with essential nutrients added. And I'm like, well, how do you get those nutrients? Could you like crush up vitamins? And it said yes, and maybe add some vegetable oil. But of course, don't try any of this at home. Like, you wouldn't know how many vitamins to crush up. I'm just saying, if they couldn't find formula, they could have at least tried that as
They
a
kept
last
that
resort.
possum, maybe milk that possum a little bit.
Milk the possum. Crush up some vitamins and some possum milk. But they would have had to try cow milk, you know,
Cow milk,
vitamins or something. But yeah, you shouldn't do that if you're listening to me right now, obviously. But then when they get back, the baby's crying and crying really loud. And that totally reminded me of when my son Nico was born. And a lot of times, anybody who's had a baby probably knows this. The babies have trouble latching onto mom's breast at first. They try, but they just can't get it. And Nico couldn't get it. And the doctor says, you need to not feed him formula, because then he'll just want that. Let him keep trying. And like for a day, I don't know how long it was, it seemed like forever, he wouldn't latch on and he was just crying and hungry, and it was so hard not to give him the formula. But he finally got it, obviously, because he's still around. But Daryl's the first person to ever feed Judith, and it was really cute to see him feeding her with the bottle with his big muscles, and then the classic scene of giving her the famous name, Little Ass Kicker.
Little Ass Kicker, yeah.
That's the most iconic moment, turns out, in this episode, you know?
Yeah. Well, and that's the part of the episode I knew was coming.
Yeah.
Again, just a lot of little, I just didn't realize how full on board he was with becoming the second, becoming a dad, becoming that scene with him holding her there. It was just pretty iconic. And then connected to that, watching again, kind of paralleling to what the governor was talking about, where he was talking about, you know, we do this to honor the people who died. We get that moment where they talk about naming the baby, and we watch Carl run through
the name of every woman who's died on the series.
Yeah, which was weird, but gave me kind of a pause for each one.
To think about.
Yeah, well, and I mean, of course, as we move on to episode 6 with the phone calls, some of those names come into play again. So
I thought it's just sad. It was kind of morbid, and nobody really replied, you know. But they're all thinking, I don't think so, Carl. But I felt bad for him.
Yeah. Well, and then he watched his dad go tearing off into the
poor kid.
Yeah, gosh. Yeah.
Okay, my next one is the zombies, the Zeds. I've thought about it a little bit. One interesting thing about this episode, because I always feel like in this series, the zombies come to seem like fodder almost, you know, like pests. And I feel like this is really a milestone for that, because the Woodburyans have such a good handle on them. When you see they have this solar powered sound machine to draw them into a pit, which is smart. And then when they do the fighting in the arena, the governor's justifying it by saying, we're reducing them, we're controlling them, we're shining a light on the monster under the bed.
Yep.
So he's trying to make people feel better about the situation. That's one of his things as the governor, is to try to keep his people calm and in good spirits, which I don't think is necessarily nefarious. I think a good leader would try to do that. But anyway,
and do it in a way that is real. Like you don't shy away from it. You're kind of putting the evil in front and showing that you can do things to control the evil, I think is a good thing.
Right. And Andrea says that makes people think that they're not as dangerous as they are, and I'm like, I don't think so, because if I see a zombie, I mean a zombie, if I see a zombie in the zoo, I don't think the zombie's less dangerous. No, like a lion or something, you know. But anyway, but the thing is, on a meta level, it's working too. He's making his people not be so freaked out by the zombies, but also us, the Walking Dead audience, and it takes the bite out, not no pun intended, a little bit. You know, it makes sense on a long running zombie show that the survivors would get better at handling them, but then, you know, and then they would feel like less of a threat and therefore less thrilling and less scary because of it. That's the downside of it. So, I think they still find ways to make scary zombie episodes for sure. I feel like when Angela Kang came back, she especially
Oh, for
paid
sure.
attention to that. But I feel like this is sort of the start, and this, and also how in season 3 here our characters have gotten so much better at handling them, where they can go into the prison and clear them all out. Then they start to feel more like pests.
Well, and Rick can do it by himself now too, so
Yeah,
that's cool.
that was a badass scene though. And the
Yeah.
way it was filmed, just slashing
Oh
through all their heads. Wow.
gosh.
Wow.
Well, it was. Yeah. There were a couple of it's kind of interesting because I think the two best like murder the zombie kill scenes were Rick and Michonne. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, again, kind of fast
A pair made
forwarding.
in heaven.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Zeds, I think in particular were interesting. I mean, there's one that I'm assuming we're going to talk about soon. Um, Greg Nicotero directed this, and um, I think what I liked the most about this is you have kind of the generic character of zombies in the background of every episode, and I think finding different ways to utilize them as a character is good when you're doing it in a way that makes sense, which is weird to say in an apocalyptic show like this, but we get to see the arena where they're using them like they would use lions in a gladiator
Mm-hmm.
arena, and then we see um, probably the zombie that everybody remembers the most when we finally get to see sort of what Rick is doing at the tail end, and we see the zombie that has, maybe you can help me out with this. Did the zombie drag Lori somewhere and then eat her? Like, I'm very confused.
I don't know, but I don't like it. I think
Yeah,
the zombie ate Lori, and maybe
yeah,
then the zombie stumbled out in the hallway. But I was trying to figure out why don't I never liked that scene, and why don't I like it? I think maybe it's because we don't see, if this is what zombies do, then you'd think you'd see a lot of zombies with big bellies, but we
yeah.
never see it again,
I don't
and we
think we
didn't
ever
see it
see it again.
before. So it just
Yeah,
feels like this weird one-off thing. Why didn't they just, I mean, it would have been gross, but have Rick find her mangled corpse? You know, this is The
yeah.
Walking Dead. They show stuff like that.
That's what I was expecting.
Yeah.
That's what I was expecting. So when he didn't find her there, but we see the weird drag marks around the corner, and then we see
Mm-hmm.
the zombie with what I can only imagine is her hair sticking out of his
Yeah.
mouth.
And Rick cut into her so he could confirm that it was Lori, I presume, right?
That I maybe he was trying to get her ring. I
Yeah,
don't know.
right.
It was just a really
It's weird.
strange way to end that episode. There's a bell in the back of my head saying that maybe there was an alternate take on what they were going to do. Like,
Hmm.
did I hear an interview where she said they filmed a zombie?
Maybe, yeah, there was something. I can't remember.
Yeah,
To go back
I
and
don't.
listen to our original episode and see if we
Yeah,
talked about that.
I've been trying hard not to. Like, I want to come into these like with a different perspective, but
Me too.
it was a weird way to go. It was a weird way. It was sort of farcical. As weird as it is to say, to have her being eaten whole by a zombie.
Yeah.
It's
I don't
strange.
think they got the reaction that they were going for from the audience, but maybe listeners have a different take on it. If you do, let us know. So, what's the next point? What do you got next?
So my next point, and I want to come back to David Morrissey because I think as I mentioned before, I think he does an amazing job of showcasing goodness while being a pretty insane guy. And
Mhm.
I found this interview where he talked a little bit about portraying the governor, and He was real big on listening to music to kind of get into the role, but he also would use images to kind of get him into the role. And he said in this interview, he liked to use to get into the governor. He liked to use very mournful pictures. And ironically enough, in the interview, he says he liked to look at, and I don't know how this connected to mournful, but he liked to look at good middle America things, things I saw in Georgia. He liked to look at pictures of happy married people in Georgia, and then he would combine that in a scrapbook with um, a British war photographer named Dave McCullen. It made me think of the Civil War podcast that we did.
Mm,
He to get into the role, he would he looked at these images, these iconic images from Vietnam and Iraq, and he said many of the most famous images of heartbreak from those wars were from this with this photographer, and he used these images to kind of get into the role of this kind of apocalypse. And as you're watching kind of him portray this character, especially as he's trying to temper what he wants to do to Michonne, as he's trying to temper what he's got hiding in his apartment, with portraying this kind governor. I find it fascinating that the actor was utilizing these real apocalyptic photographs combined with these happy like things that he was seeing in the
mm,
countryside there in Georgia. But it comes out like it comes out that he's dealing with this. And I mean, obviously we learn more about the governor as we go about why he is the way that he is, but I think we can surmise from the pictures that he started at a certain place and he ended at a certain place, and there was things that happened in between to get him to where he currently is.
mm,
But as he's kind of going through this episode, and I think my expectations were that he was going to end maybe a little harsher initially than he ends up. Again, he does a really nice job of starting in one place and ending in one place, and still leaving us with questions about what's going to cause him to show a little more of those red flags, or
mm.
just turn into the all out kind of insane governor that we see, especially in season 4, but later in the season.
Yeah, because even if you never read the comic and this is your first time watching the show, well, we saw him mow down all those soldiers, and I maintain that that's enough. He didn't need to do anything else in my eyes. I can't see any justification for that, even with what you were saying about you want to protect your city. It's like he didn't know anything about them, I don't know. I just can't
Well, I'm
come to a
with you.
place where I can see that being a good
Well,
strategy.
it's like it's the same kind of take with like Negan, down the
Yeah,
road. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
Negan's obviously a lot more harsh, but I
Yeah,
perspectively, I'm trying to like put
sure.
myself in. Yeah,
But
and
he's insane, though. I
oh,
mean, like, I just think that's the clear sign that, all right, everything else we're seeing from him, there's something else going on. And I'm kind of going along with what you're saying. Like, when is that going to come out again? I guess is what I'm saying. What he did there with those soldiers, when is that behavior going to come out again?
how he did the soldiers too. I mean, this wasn't a military. He pulled up in a car, acted like he was friendly. They
Yeah.
acted friendly back, and then they sniped them all. So
Right. And he had his mercenary guys there with him, so he's convinced them that this is what needs to happen.
yes,
He's
yeah,
convinced Merle. Was Merle there?
yeah,
I can't remember
yeah.
for sure. Martinez was there.
Uh,
I don't know if Merle was there.
I don't think Merle was there actually.
Yeah. Okay. My turn.
Yep.
So Michonne trying to get the full picture of the governor. So I looked at what Andrea thinks based on what she knows. Michonne's getting little bits and pieces of things. I don't think she fully has a full picture because I don't even think I have a full picture, honestly. So how could she? But what she has is this thing about how he went to pick up these soldiers, came back, said they were attacked by zombies. She thinks it's unlikely that at least one of them wouldn't have driven away. She sees the bullet holes in the vehicles. In this episode, she goes in to get her sword and looks through his notebook. And I looked at it closely to see if there's any incriminating evidence. It's a lot of things about running the town, what supplies to get. It says make notes on what to tell the town. They need to stay calm. You could read that as being dishonest, but you could also just read, like I was saying before, as just trying to frame things in a way so that people are handle it the best they can, um, he says, today made me wonder if being the governor or being the main man in charge makes the people feel like they actually have someone to look up to / feel like they're being taken care of. I doubt that. And then he scribbled something out. He says, I believe I'm a good leader. Sometimes I just need to relax. I love talking about my town and supporting it, but sometimes I just need to find a way to relax, like a bottle of scotch and some classic Sinatra. So that says he struggles with relaxing. He goes overboard with things. We know that he really struggles. He really goes overboard. But in this context, Michonne looking for clues, he seems self-aware about it. I think it seems harmless that he would feel like he needs to relax sometimes. He says, plan for tomorrow. I grew up always being told to be one step ahead of myself, to never stumble, which says he's a perfectionist, maybe, which can be good to some extent, but can be a flaw if it's too extreme, but it's still not a huge red flag to me. The next page is stuff about roles for running the town: sanitation, judiciary, guards. He says crime has increased 20%. I want my town to be completely crime free. Update police enforcement, enforce more public security, which sounds nice. It's also a perfectionist thing. Food rationing, blah, blah, blah. Next page, he has a list of names: Brian, Bobby, Nick, Alice, Susan. And then at the bottom, in bold, underlined, Penny. And then the next several pages are just thousands and thousands of slash marks all neatly lined up. This is where it turns into Jack Torrance from The Shining,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
this is a red flag. It's just so weird. And you can tell that this is probably a list of names of people that died. And after that last one, maybe I know that because I know it, but maybe Michonne figured it out too.
The chronology of the Notebook too is interesting.
Yeah, because he was already setting up the city before she died. Is that what you were going to say?
Yeah. And you can see, like, he writes Penny. There's exclamation points after it, I think, and maybe scribbles underneath it, and then the tally marks that come after that, which showcase Jack Torrance is a great comparison, because I remember when I first saw the Notebook again, I hadn't read the comics yet, and I was like, what are this tally marks of how many people he's killed? Like, what am I looking? And then I'm like, oh wait, this is just a guy that is just making marks in a notebook.
Or maybe it is, like, I just thought of this now, but it seems like there's too many marks for this to be true because it's several pages. But what if after Penny died, he didn't think of people as human beings anymore? So
he just thought of them
mark,
for every
like that.
Yeah,
no names.
Yeah.
I don't know. Either way, it's crazy. It's a red flag.
Yeah.
And so I don't blame Michonne for being suspicious here, but she should have said to Andrea, he has a list of names and then it's all just 3 pages of hash marks. And Andrea would be like, so he doodles, who cares? Then Michonne finds a bunch of Zeds caged up and opens it and kills them. I'm like, what the hell? You don't know what they're doing here. Why'd you do that? And then they're doing research. Come on. I was asking myself at this point, so the governor, in my view, has this zombie daughter that he hopes he can bring back, and he wants her to have this idyllic place to live in. And that's his whole thing, right? So what if